Joining us now is Richard Brodsky, a former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, now a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU, to talk about what this all means for Albany. Get to Albany in just 1 second. You're also a lawyer, counselor. We just spoke to the former federal prosecutor. What happens at this point? How do you see this all playing out? And explain this to me. Sitting diagonally across from me for the last couple of days has been the U.S. Attorney himself, Preet Bharara. Does that signify he's scared? What does it mean?
Well, the opening of the trial did not go, I think, as people had thought it would, because the prosecution witnesses, Amy Paulin and Dr. Taub, were not strong on the quid pro quo. And that's what the case is coming down to, whether or not something of value was received in exchange for something of value. And as I think most people predicted, the judge's charge has been the thing that seems to have tilted the field against Shelley Silver.
Yes.
And that is because, Bill, maybe you could, from a prosecutor's point of view, that the subjective intent of the getter of the gift is enough to prove extortion?
Well, yeah, because he's the one who's operating with the mens rea or the culpable intent.
How do you know what his intent was if he didn't testify?
Well, the judge will give the jury an instruction that a person is presumed to intend the natural consequences of their acts. You know, the prosecution's going to look at this and say, look, these people basically, you have the doctor. He wants funds for cancer research. So he agrees basically to refer cases to a firm that Shelley Silver has an interest in. Now, he doesn't know that Silver has any financial interest.
But he says there was no exchange. He says he refuses to sign the Taub.
He's correct.
He refuses to sign
on that.
a non-prosecution agreement that has the word exchange in it.
Yeah, well, the reason for that basically is because if he signs that, then essentially he's acknowledging and admitting that he did something with the intent to give a bribe.
No. He said that there was no exchange.
I understand that. In his mind, one had nothing to do with the other. He's not on trial. Silver is. That's why Silver's intent is what's important.
You don't think the jury charge is an appellate issue?
No, I don't think it's an appellate issue.
And I was told, you guys are the lawyers, but I was told that a judge's charge always favors the prosecution. I don't know if that's on the federal level, but I do want to ask this.
You won't say it, but it's true.
I do want to ask this question. Richard is, I hate to admit it, he's 1,000% correct on this. I don't like to agree with him.
Doesn't happen often, but he's learning.
Prosecutors need to show the quid pro quo. Not a single witness indicated that there was such an arrangement.
No, but there may have been a quid pro quo arrangement in Shelley Silver's mind, because Sheldon Silver, according to the indictment, agreed to do something, and in exchange for that, he wanted something in return. What he wanted in return.
But how do we get inside Mr. Silver's mind? He plays it close to the vest, and it would seem to me that that's a guarantee on appeal.
What about presumption of innocence? He doesn't have to prove his mindset. They have to prove his mindset.
Yeah, and they're going to prove his mindset, and they're going to say basically the jury can infer from what he did and the way he did it that his intent was to get something in exchange for what he was doing for the person who was the giver. That's really what it comes down to.
I don't disagree with your analysis of what it's coming down to. It just doesn't seem right.
Okay, but you have to understand, there's direct evidence, there's circumstantial evidence,
and the judge has said that this is, every day listening to her, she has said this case is based on circumstantial evidence.
Right. Now, what I'm sure the judge also did is the judge instructs the jury that the jury can draw certain inferences. Some of them are permissible inferences. The jury can infer or not infer based upon how the jury feels once they get together. The jury can infer from what happened and the way it happened that Silver intended.
Mr. Brodsky, but if the jury can infer, as indicated from a former federal prosecutor, it just seems that's not fair, because given the climate where a politician can't get a fair chance.
It depends on the strength of the inference. There are good inferences and there are not so good inferences. I guess a lot of people have been expecting evidence of a quid pro quo, and something more than a guess about what was in Shelley Silver's mind.
But the government's position is that there was a quid pro quo, and what the judge's instructions were that it really is what's in Shelley Silver's mind, not in what Dr. Taub's mind. That's the quid pro quo. In other words, if the judge The government's asking the jury to infer that but for the fact that Dr. Taub was referring these cases to Weiss and Luxembourg, Shelley Silver would not have gone as far as he did to get the grant for research.
No weight given to the fact that Taub says there was no exchange.
Because in Taub's mind, there may not have been an exchange. But Taub could be wrong. Taub's not on trial. That's the problem.
Gentlemen, let me ask this, and then I want to bring it to you on the culture in Albany. Dean Skelos and his son Adam, evidence is mounting on a daily basis. It's almost like the prosecutors are just teeing off every day and hitting the ball out the ballpark. Why in the world would you let your client go to trial when the evidence is overwhelming that's been indicated so far?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you asked how would any lawyer let his client go to trial. You have to understand that it's not the lawyer's decision, it's the client's decision. A lawyer, for all we know, the lawyers may very well have been going back and forth day after day trying to persuade Skelos to take a guilty plea.
It also might have been that the prosecution didn't offer him anything.
Well, you can always plead to the indictment. But the point is, if it comes down to the fact where if you plead guilty, you're not going to get any benefit, then you might as well roll the dice and go to trial, except in the federal court, if you plead guilty, you get a lower sentencing guideline range, which translates generally into a lower sentence.
I think there's a family dynamic in the Skelos
Such as what?
I don't know what, but this is a father and son, and those are complicating elements in terms of making purely legal or tactical judgments.
It may very well be that the government said that both plead or nobody gets a plea.
But guys, and I try to cover this as objectively as possible. But as a journalist, I feel sorry for Mr. Skelos and his son. The prosecutors are just teeing off every day. They're like, oh, we have a new wiretap for you. Listen to this incriminating evidence.
But look, compare that then to the Silver case. And, when you're dealing with the skilled prosecutors, you heard tonight, he can make a silk's purse out of a sow's ear, as I think he did with the Shelley Silver evidence. When you look at the evidence in the Skelos case, and you look at the evidence in the Silver case, and then you look at the presumption of innocence, you get where I think Dominic was talking about. You got a powerful set of data being put before the jury in the Skelos case, and you got this, what? The main guy says there was no deal and you're going to convict him of a deal?
The lead prosecution witness. I'm almost out of time, but Mr. Brodsky, I wanted you here tonight to explain the culture in Albany. To listen and to sit there in court and listen to Governor Patterson's name tossed around before the juries, Governor Cuomo's name, Governor Spitzer. What does all of this mean, this big melting pot, to the political process?
As to what's really going on, as to what the prosecution's trying to do?
As to what this means for Albany.
Well, politically, it's very damaging. As to whether it tells you anything that's accurate and truthful about the way decisions are made, what did Bismarck say? People should never be allowed to see laws being made or sausages. It's a process that doesn't fit into the textbooks. That doesn't mean that it's criminal. And I think the notion that what you'll learn from the Silver and Skelos trials is that the system itself is fundamentally corrupt, I just don't agree with that.
Gentlemen, we thank the both of you for joining us tonight. We want to have you back. Richard will be back, and he will have you here so you can put all of this in perspective for us, because it's a lot of information, and it's hard to put it all together. But thank you very much. Up next, we're going to switch gears and look at how France and the U.S. are banding together to defeat ISIS.